Hi, my name's Andy Schmuckler. Want to get into something kind of deep about where we're at right now. Almost everything you look at really you can take it pretty deep because we're engaged in America now in a battle between two forces that I could make a good case for uh, regarding as good versus evil. What we're going to talk about here has got to do with fear. Um, Fear is not in itself a bad thing. Um, uh, we wouldn't be talking about such a thing as fear unless evolution had put into us the capacity for that feeling, because that feeling has motivational consequences that helped our ancestors to survive. Being oblivious to dangers is not a recipe for getting your DNA into the future. So we, and not just us, I mean, you can see other animals get fearful. I mean, a rabbit, for example, looks to me like it's always kind of fearful. That's how you get by being a rabbit in the world of wolves and foxes and such things as that. Lions don't seem to have the same kind of fearful energy about them, and there are reasons for that. And we're someplace in the middle. We seem to be more likely to be the prey than the predator, than say a lion. But anyway, we have been endowed with the capacity for fear because it has been life-serving in the past. So I'm not going to put down fear altogether. But the thing is, there is a pattern you can see in our history, our being Americans and humans and all that, in which a certain exploitation of fear has been the tool of choice of what I would call evil power uh, through history. That the tyrant, the cruel tyrant that tends to rise to the top, has used fear to manipulate people into doing what he wants them to do, which is contrary to really having them serve their own interests. So what comes to one's mind is the way the danger from the Jews was a major fuel for the Nazi movement. And so they could take a forgery like the Protocols of Elders of Zion and instill fear in average Germans who think that the Jews who live among them are part of a conspiracy, a international plot to take over civilization. World dominance by this handful of people, 1% of the German population at that time. But you cultivate fear if you're that kind of a fascist force, and that's what they did. Which, of course, brings us to our own current bout with fascism. I've been involved in this fight for a generation now, but liberal America, pro-democracy America, was very slow to see how the force of fascism was gaining control over a major part of the American political system. That the Republican Party, to be specific, was being taken over by a force with a different spirit than had been characterizing the party before. Not a change from black to white, but I don't believe that any previous Republican president before W would have done what he did with the war on terror, which is to cultivate fear and to use that fear for political advantage. Now, I've always been struck by the difference between what FDR did in World War II. I mean, his famous statement about fear wasn't about World War II. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. But that gives you an idea of his attitude about fearfulness. His attitude about fearfulness is let's not give in to fear, and that's characteristic of a good and constructive leader, I think. But that was about the Depression. But nonetheless, you can look at how he was as a wartime leader. The United States, after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, was in a much more serious danger than 9/11 created when George W. Bush was president. So I wrote during the W administration a number of essays. You'll find them on my website, abetterhumanstory.org, but that had to do with how much the Bush presidency was being used to sow fear into the American people. You could see this because when in World War II, when we faced a huge danger, FDR never encouraged people to be scared. Nor did Churchill encourage his people to be scared. On the contrary, in both cases. But W took the war on terror and made it into a political tool. I mean, it's just perfectly obvious. If you looked at it, he was continually making these announcements of code this and code that. People should be especially vigilant. If you see something, say something. Whatever the deal was, basically alerting Americans that the threat has become more serious now. What the hell are people supposed to do with it? Nothing that they could do with it. Nothing whatsoever. It wasn't useful at all, except for the administration, which was showing already the spirit of fascism. By virtue of its willingness to sow fear. The Nazis with the protocols, the W administration with Karl Rove, the sociopathic way of utilizing a national trauma to gain more power. He played a game with respect to a resolution that would authorize him to invade Iraq, which turned out to be on the basis of a lie, which is another part of the fascistic. I'm not invested right now in what W was, but I do think it's remarkable how little Americans now recognize that so much of what Trump has taken to this ludicrous degree was already manifested in the W presidency. That something had happened on the political right, beginning with the emergence of people like Newt Gingrich, clearly a sociopath if you think about how he treated Clinton over the Lewinsky thing, and then what we find out about him. I mean, he was a complete hypocrite. What kind of a man would do that, knowing what he was doing and then going after the president of the United States with his high moralistic tone? A complete con man, a fraud. And Limbaugh, what a nasty piece of work he was. It begins there. There's always that element in the Republican Party, but the party of Reagan and the first Bush and the party of Eisenhower before that and all the way back had a lot more moral quality to it. It did actually stand for some things. It believed in some things besides getting its own power. But that changed. Begins to become visible with, especially to me, it became really visible with W and his presidency. And there was this use of fear you could see that it was a pernicious thing to do. I mean, evolution has made fear adaptive, but this was not adaptive. This was a leader utilizing people's fear in order to gain the ability to dominate further, to extend his power. We see the fascists do that all the time. And we can see Trump doing it now. That's the spirit of what we're up against. It's not just that it calls one's attention to be, there's something to be afraid of, but it's wedded to the lie as well, which is another major component of what fascism generally tends to do. It lies. It certainly says things that we would wisely judge false. Master race. What a bunch of BS. They disgraced the human race. But lies, whether they believe them or they don't believe them, and I don't know what Trump believes, but he's lying all the time. W lied us into a war in Iraq. I got to say that I don't feel sure exactly what motivated that war, but I think that a certain American imperialism coming out of Dick Cheney was a big part of it. But they found a way to get us into that war without being honest with us. And Colin Powell paid the price for being willing to not refuse when he had good reason to doubt he was being told the truth. But the truth doesn't matter to these people. Didn't matter to Hitler. It didn't matter to Putin. It doesn't matter to Trump. It doesn't matter to any of the Republicans who are on the stage right now, except for people like Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger. The rest of them go along with the lie, and they go along with the fascistic demagoguery that like in Trump's case, hate and fear the immigrants. They're coming to eat your pets. Your cats and dogs are in danger. Now, fear goes along with hate, and hate is something I talked about in an earlier video, that you get a fascistic force that gets public support without doing anything for the people, because it trains people to hate and to be gratified when the force that taught them to hate some other group attacks that other group. Sometimes they're scapegoats, sometimes they're rivals, but that's a sick dimension of the relationship between fascism and their followers. But this is another aspect of it that fits right in, that is that they foment fear. Now, Trump has said that, I mean, I read this only once, but in a very reputable place, so I think we can trust that it's true, that Trump has actually said, and I think this is dating back before he became president, I think, that power is, I'm not sure what the wording is, but basically it's about fear. He said it, and we can see that he practices it. He practices it with the public, with the Trump base. He tells them to be afraid of rapists coming in from Mexico. He tells us about all the criminality. He focuses on one case where somebody who was an illegal alien in this country, among the 33, so many people, but he can find there's always some case where somebody who's an illegal immigrant has done something bad. You would think that the crime rate among the immigrants is much, much higher than that among the native born Americans. But as I understand it, empirically, it's the opposite. That native-born Americans have a higher crime rate than the immigrant population, and even, I think, than the illegal immigrant population. But you create that fear. and Donald Trump does it all the time. He hung on to the Haitians are eating your pets thing even after the Republican governor and the Republican mayor of the town said, no, it's not true. He just kept on saying it. And presumably he knows what he's doing. I mean, in a rational world, if the people that he was talking to, if they were thinking the least bit intelligently, and they've got the native intelligence, but they would realize that if there are all these denials, not only isn't it true that the immigrants are eating people's pets in that town in Ohio, not only that, but think about the fact that he keeps on saying that in spite of the fact that it's simply not true. Why would he be lying about a thing like that? And then people would draw the right conclusions from that. That he's acting like a fascist dictator. He's giving us people to be afraid of. We're being invaded by the worst kind of people, criminals, people who have escaped from asylums. Be afraid. Now, all this figures on a dimension that I maintain is really an important dimension and can be shown operationally, but that's not what I'm going to try to do here like a social scientist. But it really has a lot to do with the battle between good and evil. A good leader doesn't lead by making people fearful. People being fearful, not only is it less pleasant for them, I mean, fear is an important emotion to have when there's danger, but it's not a good feeling to have when there isn't danger. And even worse with the fascist leaders, when there is something that's worth fearing, but it's not what that leader is telling you to fear. And that's what is the case also in America as it has become more fascist. The real threat to the well-being of most Americans consists of a variety of things that are allied together right now in the Trump political force. It's a fascistic force that's in there that is eager to restore white supremacy. There's a plutocratic component there that wants money to rule, and they formed the same basic alliance that happened in Nazi Germany between the racist and the insatiably greedy, insatiably power hungry. All form a union that whose impact on the world is almost invariably destructive. And my definition of evil is a coherent force that consistently works to make the human world worse. Fear is not only unpleasant, which makes the human world worse, that people are suffering because they're afraid. I don't like feeling afraid. I've got too much fear these days to suit me. But I think what I'm afraid of makes some sense to be afraid of. I'm afraid of getting even older and losing ground all the way into the ground over the course of who knows how many years. I've got to deal with that kind of fear. But I'm also mostly, in the day-to-day basis, I am afraid of what's happening to my country. And we've got this fascistic force that's doing this fascistic thing of generating fear, which, let's see, where did I write that? Evil rulers throughout history manipulate their people through fear. It makes people less able to think. This is sort of psychologically known. Among the major psychological effects on the person who's afraid is that they have distorted perception. They become less capable of logical thinking, more likely to be impulsive. Critical thinking is sort of out. All these things are conducive to allowing the fascistic force to lead people because they can't think straight and they're not able to see the whole panoply of things. I mean, they're able to have their attention directed at the thing to be afraid of, such that they don't notice a lot of stuff that's happening elsewhere in what they should be perceiving. There are a lot of effects of fear that are adaptive for dealing with a particular kind of a situation. You know, if there's a leopard about to jump on you, you want to have a very focused attention, and other forms of mobilization that are maybe more having to do with being motivated by one's passion to survive or whatever it is, and less motivated by any of the other more nuanced feelings and other sets of values that we may have. So it degrades a people to be fearful. Much better, like with Churchill, where you've got something really to be afraid of. And he made people brave. Whereas W and Trump, they make people afraid for no purpose other than feeding their own power. Fear is a regrettable necessity. Growing it, cultivating it, fanning it, inciting it, including direct, even when you have a proper, that is a destructive thing to do. It makes the world more broken. Trump uses it on his people, and he uses it to control. He shows that fear is the root of power in his mind. It's what he uses it to control the Republican office holders to an extent that I don't believe anybody's ever controlled a political party. He does it by intimidation. It's all the way of the gangster. Other presidents have not liked it when people in their own party criticize them. But Trump will politically kill people for that. What Putin does to his rival in the prison in Siberia, Trump would do to Liz Cheney, Mark Sanford, anybody that criticizes him will pay the price. And they know it. And we know from testimony even from the first term, that a lot of Republicans understand how dangerous Trump is, but they're going to do his bidding because they know he has the power to kill them, and they fear him. They fear him in a way that I don't believe. I don't know who. I mean, every president probably has power in the party and probably exercises it some, but I've never been aware of anything like this kind of intimidation. This intimidation set in 2017, and I don't know how he accomplished it so early, but it was obvious by the time he got impeached the first as well as the second time that he used his support in the Republican base as a threat. I will destroy you. That's not how every political leader in America has dealt with their party. I've never seen anything like this. There's probably always a little bit of this. I'm not even much aware of a little bit of this most of the years I've been observing things. But with Trump, not only is he going to try to use fear on his political party, he's been using fear with respect to major actors of a private nature in the society. I've lived under, I don't know how many presidents now. I start with Truman. I think it goes up to 11 or something like that. I don't believe that at any point, any private entity, like say Bezos controlling the Washington Post, and a whole lot of other things like Zuckerberg, and these people have been appeasing Trump out of fear because they believe that Trump would make them pay a price for doing things which they, as Americans, have the right to do. Maybe my memory has got a hole in it, but as I go through my files of various American presidencies, and I've taught American history, so I'm not really ignorant. I can't think of another time when people. A headline I wrote down: fearing retribution, Trump critics muzzle themselves. Fear. I think I see fear, not just in the Washington Post. I think I see fear also in the New York Times. Somebody or other who's one of the very good commentators, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting, says that there are, it's on Bulwark. I don't remember which of the guys, that there are three kinds of press that we're going to have in America. And here's the issue of power and fear comes in. So state media like Fox News and all that are basically going to they're going to help Trump tell his lies. And then there's a real then there's in the middle there's something that's going to normalize what's going on and give platform, I think was the word they used, to people who they know are lying. And they include the New York Times there. That they talk about things in a sort of even-handed, these people say the earth is round, these people say the earth is flat. We report, you decide. Speaking of lies, fair and balanced, lies. Such a lack of integrity to see in one's own society. I have a very high regard for integrity. Like I've really appreciated Liz Cheney this time around. I mean, she's been heroic in manifesting integrity, consistently doing that. And it just disgusts me how little integrity there is, and how much the Republicans on the in the Congress are allowing Trump's threats to control them. I mean, it was just a few people that got driven out of the party because they refused to let Trump intimidate them. But they recognized that they couldn't survive in that party. And there we have the problem. Trump would not have this power to intimidate if the people of the Republican base didn't give it to him. It's because people are afraid of him because the Republican base is going to back him up against whoever. There's a whole bit of problem there. What's with those people? And I think we can probably assume that the people who are most readily can be exploited by their fears are people of not of a random sort. That there are certain kinds of personality structures and certain kinds of child rearing and certain kinds of religion and a whole pattern of things probably feed into how easily you can grab people by their fears. Just saw one of the Music Man with Robert Preston. Is such a magnificent musical, and he has this scene where this con man is whipping up the city of all the townspeople of River City into being afraid. He actually, it's part of the song that you really got to be very afraid of the corrupting influence of this pool table that's arrived in town. This is just something. It's a magnificent piece of work, The Music Man, just in general. I, I don't know how this guy hit this grand slam home run, and then I'm not aware of any other real, long balls out of old Meredith Wilson. But this is just brilliant. And he goes to these townspeople in Iowa. I've been surprised that Iowa has been able to be manipulated by sort of an Elmer Gantriest, phony kind of religion out of the Republican Party and perhaps elsewhere, evangelical stuff. That I always thought it was kind of a liberal place, and I suppose in some ways it is. But anyway, this Iowa town, he gets all whipped up uh, with using fear. About they're going to be corrupted and they're going to get into the grips of animal instincts and tapping into of a whole variety of things that they're afraid of. What does he use? Are words creeping into his vocabulary like swell and so's your old man? Well, it's interesting to sort of infer what this Iowan who wrote this stuff is reflecting about some of the mentality of his society, which I think he feels a lot of endearment toward. But he sees that they are vulnerable to a guy like what's his Hill is his last name, Harold Hill, the Music Man, coming into town, cultivating their fears of something they had no reason to be afraid of, in order to use him for his own purposes. And that's where we are in America now. Except there's nothing lovable about Donald Trump and all that he represents. He is he's actually killing people. He doesn't care about it. I am somewhat impressed as I watch The Music Man, how completely selfish this guy is at the beginning. I'm in the process of watching it, not for the first time. I'm going to watch to see whether is it plausible that he's going to become the guy who gets the girl at the end of the movie, and I'm not sure what the answer is, but it's very satisfying, even if it isn't plausible. But Trump is really mean. He's not at all nice. He manipulates people by tapping into the worst in them. The religious traditions that we have, if we're talking about good and evil, the religious traditions are very meaningful in their commitment to be not afraid. The idea of be not afraid is strung through, I think, both the Old and the New Testaments. And I suppose a lot of that's got to do probably, I don't know, I haven't read the references lately, but I think a lot of it has to do with some kind of a faith. But then there's also the be not afraid of a leader like Churchill, who, and FDR, whereas W cultivated fear, FDR didn't deal with the war as something that Americans should walk around with fear about. We're going to get this job done. The Atlantic Charter that FDR and Churchill wasn't an expression of fear. It was an expression of vision. This is what we are fighting for. Maybe one of the things that should be done is to have some kind of an Atlantic Charter drawn up by the best leaders we can get hold of, and we do need more leaders, bigger leaders right now. Draw an Atlantic Charter of this is the kind of America that we want to be. Not one where a fascistic leader wields power in ugly ways to create a situation where he gets his needs met at the expense of a lot of normal, everyday, average Americans. We can't even take pride in our country right now in the way that Americans have been somewhat entitled to for a long time, leader of the free world. We don't want that future. We don't want America, our country, to be on the wrong side of the line between good and evil. If you're interested in seeing whether I can show the importance, fundamental validity from an evolutionary perspective about talking about good and evil, I implore you to go to my website, where I've got a lifetime of laying it out systematically in a way that I don't think has holes in it. So if you'd like to see if that can be shown, please go to abetterhumanstory.org. And please subscribe to this series of videos that I do, where I'm always coming from this integrated picture, one in which the battle we're fighting in America can be illuminated in some important ways if we understand what it is that we're up against and what is the nature of the battle, and how good and evil are actually coherent forces that you can see working in the world. And when I say see, I have the line, you can see this force. I'm talking here about a force of brokenness, but it could be the other better side. The way we can see that force, the way we see the wind in the swaying of the trees and the flapping of the clothes on the line. It can be shown, and at abetterhumanstory.org, you can see how I do that. And on some of the videos too. So please subscribe if you're interested. Please visit my website, A Better Human Story. And please do what's in you to do to help us in this moment where being afraid needs to be permitted enough to motivate us, to make sure that this Trumpian future he's dragging us toward is not our future and our children's and our grandchildren's. Thanks.